Hello, Robert.
Hello.
Good morning. Thank you very much for being with us today. It's a pleasure to have you. Could you maybe first introduce a little bit yourself so everybody knows exactly your background?
Yes, no, happy to, Nicolas. Thank you for the invitation. I'm from German origin, family, long history in farming, but I'm a scientist by background, and came into agriculture myself more than 20 years ago. I was a partner at McKinsey at the time. I helped to establish the agricultural practice, advising agricultural clients. And then I joined Syngenta, which is one of the leading agricultural companies based in Basel, Switzerland. That brought me to Switzerland at the time. And I was on the global executive team. I was responsible for R&D, for business development, and one or two of the divisions. And the one thing I didn't do actually at Syngenta was doing something truly transformational in agriculture. So I left in 2014 and joined a creator of new companies called Flagship Pioneering, based in Boston in the US. And we're basically working on creating new companies in the life science space, pharmaceuticals and agriculture. And the first company that I helped to establish there is a company called Indigo. I joined Indigo in 2014 when we were still a man and a dog, very tiny shop, and have been the chairman of the company for the last 7 years. And I'm an executive partner responsible for that agricultural portfolio at Flagship, and obviously spend a lot of time on Indigo and trying to transform agriculture and food.
Okay, very good, thank you. Before we moved to Indigo, maybe a few words about agriculture. How is doing the agriculture nowadays? What are maybe the misconceptions and the challenges you see in the agriculture?
Yes, it's an excellent question, obviously, very high on my list every day. I think the agricultural system does one thing really well. It produces enough calories, in principle, to feed 8 billion people on this planet.
Okay.
But it also has some significant weaknesses. And I would characterize these issues in two areas specifically. The first is transparency, and the second is the whole question of how modern, how analog, how efficient is really the agricultural system. On the transparency side, the agricultural food system has basically grown through history into something which is very local, a lot of tiny local players. It's very siloed. If you have a big player, then they typically just own a certain silo part of the industry, like trading or seeds or these things, and very fragmented at the same time. The whole value chain is very, very separated out. So there is a substantial transparency issue for the consumer and the signals of the consumer, what they want to eat, to reach the grower, the farmer at the other end of the spectrum. And then there is this phenomenal fact that the agricultural industry, in its asset structure, in terms of how digital it is versus analog, how efficient it is basically still based on technologies and assets that were established 80 to 100 years ago. A lot of fax, a lot of paper slips, a lot of phone calls, an enormous difficulty to basically go from step to step, which of course makes it really difficult to, for example, raise quality of food or to pay farmers, give the farmer incentives to run a farm in a more sustainable way. Because if you have a very intransparent and fragmented chain done in an analog way, these connections between downstream and upstream, between the consumer and the farmer, are very weak. And that is a fundamental problem of the ag and food chain.
And this is the same for every country or every region in the world, or this is specific for some regions?
Well, the funny thing is, it's a perfect question. I always say agriculture is the ultimate local system. It is global, but it's so local at the same time. And it's global in its problems. I mean, Nicolas, to your question, in each and every country, the fragmentation, the lack of transparency, the inefficiency of the chain is present. It looks different if you then go from country to country. In some situations, you might have a weak distribution system. In other countries, in emerging markets in particular, market access, just being able to sell your crop as a farmer, might be your most direct problem. In other geographies, it's more the availability of information as such, or the clarity of your kind of information levels to run a farm in a sustainable way. It's all variations on the same with differences, but in all geographies it's the same problem.
Okay. So now let's move to Indigo. Could you explain what is Indigo and what are the different business lines of Indigo and how this is going to help the agriculture you just described?
Yeah. So we established Indigo based on a number of key platforms that establish the businesses that we have. One of them is a unique biotechnology platform. Two of them are very special and unique, very scalable digital platforms.
Okay.
The biotechnology platform uses the principle that evolution has basically created a symbiotic relationship between a plant and the microbes that live within the plant. Many of people will have heard about the microbiome that's in the human gut. That microbiome does exist true in a plant. Okay. And through hundreds of millions of years of evolution, the microbiome and the plants have evolved as an ecosystem to make the plant more healthy, more quality, and so on. Modern agriculture has destroyed that relationship. And Indigo reestablishes that relationship again.
How it has been destroyed?
It has been destroyed because we're using too many pesticides, we're using too many fertilizers. We have bred seed crops by, at the same time, reducing the diversity of the microbiome by 99%, 99.9%, dramatically reducing it. And so Indigo uses the natural microbiome, brings it back to the crops that we grow, like corn or soybean or wheat or rice, and puts them on the seed, and that microbe basically populates the plant and makes it a healthier plant, a more robust plant, a higher quality plant.
But it can be done from one day to another, or it will take years
You can do it overnight. You can do it in every time you plant a crop. Every season you can do it, and you can vary it. You might have microbes that help in particular against drought and water stress.
Okay.
You have others that help the plant to be more robust against fungal disease or against pests like insects that want to chew on the plant. And you can combine them in different ways. Indigo has about 30 products in the market already, microbiome products.
Okay.
And it basically owns about 90% of the world microbiome and has hundreds of patents. So very, very strong. So that's number one.
Yeah.
A biotech, enabler of harnessing nature to help the crop. The digital platforms are basically trying to bring a systemic answer to overcome the problems that we just talked about. Platform number one is called Indigo Carbon, because there's a very interesting real contribution that agriculture can make to solving climate change. In today's world, farmers are running a farm and they're putting more CO2 into the atmosphere. So agriculture in today's version is contributing to the increase of CO2 in the atmosphere and makes climate change worse.
How?
Because basically when you plow a field, when you put pesticide on a field, when you put fertilizer on a field, you make the carbon that's in the soil, you put it free, and it basically goes into the atmosphere. Fertilizers themselves produce a lot of nitrogen, nitrous gases, which are greenhouse gases as well. But there's a different version of agriculture, which is called regenerative agriculture. The term already says you regenerate the quality of the soil, and when you do that, you have a number of effects. First of all, you grow a better crop. It's a more nutritious crop, it's more healthy. You get more crop over time, so you increase your yield, which helps with profitability. And you can do it with less fertilizer and less pesticide. So the grower needs less cost to grow the crop.
Does it mean that we are going into a direction where less fertilizer and pesticide, or no fertilizer and pesticide?
I think it will take a long time to go to no.
Okay.
But the direction will clearly be less and less. So it's very clear that we have a path already towards halving the amount of fertilizer and pesticides over the next 10 years.
Okay.
And that would make a huge contribution.
Yeah, for sure.
But come back to regenerative agriculture. Why we call it Indigo Carbon is that when your farmer does these practices, they basically put more carbon into the soil. They reduce the CO2 in the atmosphere and putting it into the soil. And the process for how this works is called photosynthesis. Again, nature invented a genial process called photosynthesis that takes CO2 out of the atmosphere, converts into sugar, basically, grows a plant, grows its roots, and creates the biomass that enhances the carbon in the soil. And the key thing for a grower to go to regenerative practice is an incentive to do it. And that's what Indigo Carbon provides, because it basically helps the grower to get carbon credits for putting carbon in the soil. There's a completely new revenue stream that never existed in agriculture before.
Okay.
The only money farmers made in the past were on selling their crop. Now they can be carbon farmers at the same time and get a new revenue stream.
Okay.
So that's Indigo Carbon, the first digital platform. And the second digital platform is what we call Indigo Marketplace. Indigo Marketplace is a digital grain marketplace where the grower, the farmer, can sell their crop to a downstream buyer in a direct relationship. It's fully traceable. The buyer knows exactly from which farm the crop comes. It's very, very specific about the crop quality, because in the moment of harvest, every crop is a specialty.
Yeah, for sure.
And we basically make sure that that grain quality is sold to the downstream buyer. The farmer has transparency on the opportunity to sell. They can use pricing tools to increase their pricing opportunity, and they get a premium on the specialty character of the crop. I'll give you an example. InBev, which is the largest brewer in the world, sources sustainable rice at millions and millions of bushels from indigo farmers. That rice uses less water and less fertilizer to grow, and the farmer gets a 6% premium on its profit. And 6% means a lot, because the typical profit margin of farming is 2 to 4%. So it is a dramatic kicker on the profit for farmers. So microbiome, Indigo Carbon, and Indigo Marketplace are the three business lines that Indigo established. And together, they basically decommoditize agriculture. They basically take these trends of low quality, no incentives, in transparency, and move them into transparency, new incentives, and clear consumer signals translated to the grower.
And one final word on Indigo, how is it doing now? I mean, in which step of growth you are at the moment?
Yes. So basically all three platforms have been well established.
Okay.
Carbon has been the latest, microbiome has the longest history. We have basically sold microbiome already in more than 5 million acres in places like the US, in Brazil, in Europe, and in India. So this is a well-established business. We have traded more than more than $1.5 billion of grain on the marketplace, and we're growing very rapidly. We have grown 600% last year, 2020, on marketplace. And then on carbon, this is our new business, as I said. We have about already 2.5 million acres of farmers signed up to change practices and to get carbon credits for the carbon they put into the soil. And we have a pipeline of 50 million acres, which means 10% of all US agricultural acres already showing a concrete interest to join that program. So it's very fast growing. It grows with hundreds of percents per year. And all three platforms are technically proven. The key is
everywhere in the world or in specific regions?
We of course, as a startup, we are kind of prioritizing rigorously. We are in about 8 countries right now around the world, but we are already in the US. We are in Latin America, both in Brazil and Argentina. We're in Europe, and we're in Asia as well, with India. So we're expanding from there. There's going to be more countries over time, and it's very applicable to every farmer in the world. That's the thread. Everything we do can be applied to every farmer in the world.
So basically, we could say that Indigo is a revolution for agriculture, like Moderna is for traditional farmer.
I think you could say that. I think you could say that, Nicolas. And it's a revolution in the sense that there is a nexus of how agriculture can improve, where 3 things have to come together. Farmers have to become more profitable. They are the poorest income group, and if you want to optimize their behavior, you have to give them financial incentives. Farming has to become more sustainable. The way we're doing it today is degrading the soil. It's making the air and the water worse. We can't do that. So we need to reverse course. And then number 3, consumers want to buy food that improves their health and is grown in a way that they like. Now, Indigo puts these 3 things together in a synergistic way. It translates the consumer signal into incentives and concrete recommendations to farmers to change their practices, to be more sustainable and more profitable at the same time. And that's the fundamental thing. The revolution is moving from a system that commoditizes, that reduces the quality of food constantly, to decommoditize, to raise the quality of food, to make it better for the farmer, better for the planet, and better for the consumer. And I think that you can call it a revolution. I would agree.
Great. And what about countries that suffer from You mentioned drought a little bit before, but countries that suffer from drought, from lack of infrastructure, because you spoke about marketplace, but you need some infrastructure to do it. So how do you imagine Indigo going into these regions or these poor regions or countries?
Yeah, oh, that's an excellent question. Obviously, we have learned and built our business first from, let's say, larger scale farmers, because it was just, I mean, the numbers were more approachable. That which naturally leads you to places like the US, Brazil, France, or Germany. Yeah. But we also immediately, started with a joint venture in India. And now let me take that example. In terms of the absolute number of customers, grower customers, India is our biggest market.
Yeah, for sure.
And that gives you an indication of a number of things. First of all, you can basically do microbiome seed treatment the way we do it on every single farm. Because it's a very simple thing that farmers do. They put a seed in the ground and grow a crop. And treating the seed with a biological treatment that comes from nature is a very healthy and also occupationally healthy version of how you basically help farmers to improve their crop. That crop becomes more drought resistant, it becomes more heat resistant, it requires less water, and it basically becomes higher quality crop in every geography that you grow it. Okay. Right? Actually, interestingly, the yield effect in an emerging market, in a developing country where growers are less sophisticated today, is even higher than what you're going to find in the US. Okay. So the benefit for the grower, for the microbiome, is very high. And then secondly, the great thing about these digital platforms is that the scalability is massive. It doesn't require a lot of infrastructure. It doesn't require a lot of new assets. What you're really doing is you're overcoming these analog barriers that we have created by creating direct transparencies. Farmers are very, very mobile phone prone. They're actually early adopters. And that's true in all geographies of the world. You can go to Tanzania, pretty much every farmer in sub-Saharan Africa is a mobile phone user. You go to India, the same is true. So an online digital platform like we provide is very scalable and expandable. So we will over time clearly grow into emerging markets and make this accessible to every grower.
Fantastic. Maybe a final question, very broad. What are we going to eat in 20 years? We speak a lot about the fishing industry and the animal farming industry and all the problems it causes to the planet. What about agriculture and what about all these food systems?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. I think I would say the way I see the ag food system evolving, I think the central message is that we as consumers will eat the kind of food that we know was produced in a way that we like. Okay. And we will also like the health benefits that provides. And let me give you an example. And let me start with a tricky one. Many people would argue, you know what, these feed crops, in other words, crops that go to animals mainly to feed them, like corn or soybean, don't have a real impact. I think they do. Because when you look at the health of a cow or a chicken that eats the feed, it depends very much so in terms of the fat it has and the meat quality and so on the feed that they get.
Yeah, for sure.
And if we improve the corn and soybean that goes into the feed of these animals will be healthier and we'll like the meat that we get in there. Now, that will be very true for crops that we consume directly. Rice basically is the most important staple crop for people around the planet. It is actually consumed like a vegetable. If you go to Japan, if you go to Bangladesh or India, people consume very different versions of rice. The quality and the taste of that rice depends very much on how it's grown. That will over time improve, and the type of rice at scale will be done in a different way. By the way, that's why AB InBev, the large brewers in the world, source special rice, because it helps with the quality of the beer already today. And then last, let's not forget there's very important crops that provide the clothing that we have, like cotton. Cotton has been one of the crops that Indigo has, changed very early on. And what it does is, it gives a cotton crop that has longer fibers. It's much better for the quality of it. It is much more sustainably produced. Okay. And so you'll like the t-shirt better that you will have on while you basically have your food. I think the bottom line is, the agriculture and food system over the next 20 years is going to move from the early 20th century into the middle of the 21st century. We're going to catapult it forward 120 years because the technology that we have today, both biotechnology as well as digital technology, is going to enter agriculture and food, and it will do this at a global scale with everybody. And I think Indigo is going to play a key role in this.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Robert, for your time. That was very, very instructive and very motivating as well. And have a very good day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Nicolas. Great discussion.
Thank you.